Franchising made simple.
Welcome to the latest episode of Fran Simple, the podcast designed to make the concepts of franchising simple. I'm your host, Mark Vandegrift, and with me is the president of FranSource, Steve Vandegrift. Steve, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. You know, our topic today certainly may not be the most glamorous, but I really believe it's one of the most important components of any successful franchise system. It's also where we invest probably more than 60% of our time with every client on their project. It's that important.
Well, I fell asleep at operations manual. Is that a problem?
Not at all. Long as you can, make yourself heard through this podcast. People like to hear people talk apparently on these things.
Good. Well, when people hear operations manual, I get this picture of this big binder sitting on a shelf collecting dust. But that's not the case in franchising, or so you tell me. After 30 years of experience, I think you know. So tell us and our listeners why it's so important.
Well, let me first start based on that comment. You're right. Even some franchise attorneys, and we work with a lot of franchise attorneys around the country, and they'll joke that, once they've seen it one time, they never look at it. Well, that's the way it's implemented. So in today's technology world, there's a lot of ways to keep things fresh. You're pointing your franchisees to simple ways to be able to access the content they need, et cetera. Going back to the original question, the operations manual is really a playbook for the entire franchise system. It also serves as a training manual, initially for the initial training program with franchise owners, some of their key team members, and certainly their employees on an ongoing basis. So I believe it really transforms a business from something that depends, let's say, on the owner's experience into a business that can be replicated consistently across dozens and in many cases, hundreds of locations. I believe without it, franchisees, they're going to determine their own way of doing things, and that's how brands become inconsistent. I often say it creates a wild, wild west atmosphere where every franchisee potentially does it their way. It's either going to be that, or franchisees will constantly be bombarded by their franchisees for guidance, which is actually the best case scenario in this situation because it sure beats the wild, wild west.
Well, maybe we should rename it the playbook, because if you think about it, a football team, for example, is going to keep revisiting its playbook. So maybe we should get a trademark around a franchise playbook.
There you go. And it would certainly be more modern than hearing a manual. Again, to your point, people think of something that sits on the bookshelf and collects dust. But when properly implemented, it becomes a major tool and ultimately impacts the success of the franchise in a big way.
So you'd say it's the heart and soul of the franchise system, at least the operations side of it.
Absolutely. The franchise agreement, if you think about it, it establishes the legal relationship so both parties know how they're supposed to behave, so to speak. But the operations manual actually instructs franchisees how to operate the business successfully. Ultimately, it's the roadmap and the document that protects the brand standards, the operational procedures, while helping franchisees deliver a consistent customer experience. And as we both know, that is so critical to a successful franchise.
So let's go into the detail of the operations manual. What are the essential components of a comprehensive, let's call it the franchise operations playbook?
Well, as you know, I often refer to it as the Bible of the business. It needs to address every aspect. And so that isn't just the daily operational procedures, although that typically is one of the, or if not the largest section in the manual, and it should be. But it should cover the hiring, the employee management, customer service expectations, brand standards, marketing guidelines, sales processes, technology solutions, vendors and suppliers, reporting requirements, how to handle inventory management, safety, cleaning and maintenance, quality insurance, and I could go on and on. Our manuals in many cases are hundreds of pages, and ultimately though, it's easy to get through and it's easy to understand where you need to go when you have a question. So the goal ultimately is to eliminate any uncertainty so franchisees know exactly how to operate the business regardless of what matter it is.
Sounds like there's probably a balance of detail, but how detailed do you think the manual should actually be?
As detailed as it possibly can be. And that's why, we have a very systemized procedures to, in essence, obtain that information from clients and be able to advise them in terms of what might be missing. And that's part of our development of the operations process. In terms of detail, it needs to be detailed, but it also needs to be practical and easy to navigate and understand. So it should explain not only what to do, but why it matters. You need to give franchise owners the why. I like to think of it as a training guide, a reference manual, and a quality control system all rolled into a single document.
So I think of putting together like a bike at Christmas time, and I like pictures and few words. Can a document like this, if you were to make it all pictures, is that even a possibility, or are we doing illustrations along with descriptions? Like, give us a sense of what that operations manual is really going to look like when it's done.
Well, think of a food prep and recipes manual. The best way to draft and prepare that for efficient use and really robust use is to have photos. So everything
Okay.
from the preparation procedures with photos, the plating procedures with photos, the all of that is so important, and photos are certainly incorporated into operations manuals. Even things like when you're getting into the construction of the business, most of our clients, they'll provide sample floor plans, architectural drawings. In many cases, their architect will provide the local architect CAD drawings. So it's not just all words. It's
Mhm.
actually other supplemental photos, graphics, etc., that help explain the story and how to do it best.
Well, what if a business already has documented its current procedures? Can they take that and just call it a franchise manual?
Not quite.
Okay.
Internal operating procedures are certainly a starting point, but a franchise manual must also address franchise specific responsibility, like brand protection, reporting
Mhm.
requirements, approved suppliers, ongoing support, construction, leasehold improvements, marketing compliance, and certainly operational standards that's going to help ensure consistency across every location.
Well, translating this over to the franchisee,
Mhm.
how does the operations manual benefit the franchisees? It's obvious that they're trying to replicate a system, but are they walking around the store literally with a operations manual in hand and going, section 3.2, I need that?
Well, franchisors are wise to use it, as I've mentioned many times, as a training manual, because ultimately that comprehensive operations manual, it's going to shorten the learning curve.
Mm.
Franchisees don't have to then learn or reinvent processes or learn through what I call trial and error. Instead, they end up getting proven systems that help they and their team members become successful and understand the system much more quickly and confidently. And that's the other side of it. You want your franchisees and their team members to be very, very confident, especially when we're talking the operational, day to day operational procedures.
Do you see, as you're going through the operations manual development, that it's benefiting the franchisor by identifying gaps or maybe even revisiting the way they do something?
Oh, no question. That happens all the time. Again, they trust our experience. You know, we've been helping companies do this for 30 years. We work in all types of industries, and they love the fact that we'll provide suggestions. And we always say, look, we're going to throw, I'll call them darts. We're going to throw a million darts your way during the development process. And you take that, you absorb it, and you determine if that might maybe make a particular system or whatever a little bit better. And so, in terms of that, that's what we feel our responsibility is. I don't think we have a single client that hasn't gone through this process and come out the other side and said, holy cow, Steve, you and your team has even made our core business better. And it might be a company that's been operating 30, 40, 50 years. And in many cases, that's why this process helps. We've
Mhm.
had many clients that say, you know what, you asked questions and made us address questions that we haven't even thought about for 15 years. So the benefit to the franchisor ultimately is it creates consistency again. Every location follows the same standards, the operational protocols, and it certainly makes training easier, the support more efficient, and quality much, much more predictable. And then, of course, it also protects the brand as the franchise system grows. Everybody is following that same system.
Well, I would think if you get everything documented, it's going to reduce like support requests and questions and, calls in the middle of the night. Do you find that when it's properly done, that clients will make a comment like that? Because I mean, I guess there's nothing to compare it to. to say, oh, I'm getting less requests now, unless you've had a client that they had an ops manual prepared by a different firm and then they come to you and you go, there's a bunch of gaps. And then post implementing those gaps, they find out they have less support requests. So give us a flavor for, I guess, your experience in that regard.
Well, you're exactly right. And that's kind of a two-part direction I need to go. We do work with clients every year that engage with other providers. They took two franchisees through their training program and they realize that it's deficient. And
Mm.
so they engage with us to really make it what it should be. And in terms of the support side, does it reduce support requests? Well, absolutely, as I previously shared. When a franchisor has a comprehensive manual resource available, most everyday questions are going to be answered immediately by referencing the manual. And part of the initial training program is training your franchise partners how to access that information quickly, easily, and without having to contact the corporate office, which allows the franchisor support team to focus on coaching, strategic growth, and business development rather than answering what I would call routine operating questions.
So we always think about like a website being organic. It's never really finished. We keep making updates. I would assume an ops manual is pretty close to that.
You're absolutely correct. I like to say it's a living, breathing document. Great franchise systems continually improve their operation and their systems. Markets change, technology evolves, customer expectations shift, and obviously new best practices emerge. So the operations manual should be considered a living document that actually grows with the franchise system. And the great thing is with technology, information that may change occasionally can be housed, or regularly, I should say, can be housed on an intranet system. Even Google Drive works great. So when the equipment list changes, for example, the section in the manual that discusses the equipment list can actually provide a link to the equipment list on the Google Drive. And when the next franchisee joins the system and clicks on the link to the list, it's the current list. This
Mm.
eliminates having to update the actual manual for these types of changes. And we've been introducing our clients to this for a number of years. And our clients love the efficiency of the system. We even help them build out their Google Drive system. And I believe it's one of the reasons that we're really well known for our comprehensive operations manuals, but also the technology that can back up and streamline that updating process.
So I'm going to ask this in a maybe a weird way. I could say, how often should the ops manual be updated? But
Mhm.
really, how often should a franchise or revisit the ops manual to make sure it's updated?
Well, number one, we coach our clients that, especially those first 3, 4, 5 training programs, the initial training program, they should really be sitting there as they're walking through it, either with a recorder, an iPad to make notes, even a pad of paper, to be able to note when they see there might be a little bit more information that could be provided, or franchisees are consistently asking the same question about a section. But on an ongoing basis, once you really have it dialed in, things are still going to change. So at least annually, I like to say, if not quarterly, to make sure that your team, your training team is aware that, look, we're coming up on the quarter. We have 2 more trainings scheduled. We really want you to be looking out for anything that should be updated. We have an outdated list. We didn't update it on the Google Drive or the intranet system. And then, of course, with additional updates, whenever there's operational changes or improvements, such as I mentioned, updated equipment and inventory list of suppliers change, technology upgrades, regulatory changes, or even new best practices that the franchisor develops. And franchisees should always have access to the most current information to continue ensuring that consistency. So that's where that manual becomes such a vital, important piece to a franchise network success.
Well, we're going to start wrapping things up here, but we always have our two questions that we like to ask. And the first one is about mistakes that franchisors make regarding their operations manual. What are you
Well, truth,
seeing?
yeah, no, and I get that one because we've had clients like this that launched, they had an FDD done, they had some SOPs. So ultimately, I believe they either wait too long to develop it or they treat it as a one-time project. They get it done, they put it to bed. We've had companies come to us and admit, I haven't updated our ops manual for 13 years. Will you help us do it? And I'm telling you, when most of the manual ends up redlined, you know they haven't been keeping it updated. The strongest franchise systems continuously refine their documentation based on franchisee feedback, what they themselves determine needs to be updated, operational experience of both experienced franchisees and the franchisor, and then certainly changing market conditions. So again, it's a living, breathing document. There should be a routine that is built into the system that ensures that there's a set of eyes or a number of set of eyes on that manual on a continual basis.
Well, and I know from our perspective, driving differentiation is always important. And anytime you can revisit something, a concept where you can introduce things that maybe even a franchisee brings to the table that helps differentiate you, then you definitely want to systematize that because it's just going to make the entire concept stronger and less likely for someone to go try to do it on their own.
That's right. They see there's meat on the bone, as I
Yeah.
like to say.
Well, you get your opportunity to leave our listeners this with one piece of advice. Try to keep it to one piece of advice that when they're working on an operations manual, what should their takeaway be today?
Well, I think one of the most important things is don't think of your operations manual as a requirement. Think of it more as your most valuable business asset because every hour that you invest in documenting your systems today saves countless hours of support tomorrow. And it's certainly going to significantly increase the likelihood that your franchisees will succeed and your franchise network will continue to grow. Successful franchises, I like to say, aren't built on great ideas alone. They're built on systems that can be taught, they can be replicated, and they can continuously improve, and they seek to continuously improve.
Well, we get a lot of folks that inquire and they go, "Hey, I need to get an attorney to get my FTD and my franchise agreement all set, et cetera, et cetera." And then they totally miss this part. So it
Yes,
seems like your advice today, walking away from it, is don't just do a franchise agreement. Don't just think your existing procedures are sufficient. Really consider developing a operations manual, whether it be printed binder or virtually sitting on a drive. Make sure you systematize that because that is the asset that you're offering people to invest in. Did
it's
I
your whole,
take that away
you,
correctly?
You nailed it because, first of all, operations manuals are rarely printed nowadays. They're accessed
Yeah.
electronically. And the operations manual can actually be a sales tool during the franchise sales process. When someone has the opportunity to review that, now certainly the table of contents to the manual is disclosed typically in the FDD. And
Mhm.
so at the end of the day, if you can be sharing that during a discovery day and just skimming through it and showing the organization, showing the intranet system, with all the forms, the worksheets, the checklists, you're going to see their eyes get very wide. And we've worked with a lot of clients that were pretty major and they were attracting senior VPs of FedEx, et cetera. And they also were attracting multi-unit operators. And we've been involved. Many of our new franchisors will ask us to attend the initial training program. And there's been a number of times where the initial franchisees were multi unit operators. And in one case, it was a food concept. They own multiple brands. And when literally the first day of a 14-day training program, we weren't 30 minutes into the manual, and they stopped us and said, "We have never seen such complete manuals in our
Hmm.
entire business experience." Now, how did that make my client feel? How did that make us feel? It's worth the time to invest because it's not just going to help you grow your franchise, it's going to help you sell franchises.
Very good. Well, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't sexy, but it's important. And 60% of someone's franchise business is worth talking about. So I'm sure we're going to revisit ops manuals in the future. Maybe take them section by section. That'll put everyone to sleep.
We'd have to break that into about 5 podcasts, probably.
Right. Well, let's wrap up today's episode of Fran Simple. Thanks for joining us, Steve, and for all of our listeners. As always, please like, share, subscribe, and subscribe to Fran Simple, the podcast designed to make the concept of franchising simple. Until next episode, may your business expand through the power of franchising.